Hi, my question here is in this reaction where you have calcium carbonate reacting with hydrochloric acid, 2 moles of hydrochloric acid, to produce carbon dioxide and calcium chloride and water. The question is how many grams of the carbon dioxide can be made by reacting 125 grams of calcium carbonate with 125 grams of hydrochloric acid. It's a two-part question. The second part is how many grams of which reactant are left over, and it gives us a hint, says find the limiting reactant. I've laid out the problem, or the solution rather, here using dimensional analysis, and what I first of all did was to determine the limiting reactant. We want to determine the limiting reactant because you want to know which of the reactants limits the amount of your product, and in this case our product is carbon dioxide, not calcium dioxide, carbon dioxide. So using what was given, 125 grams of calcium carbonate, I converted it into moles, and it reacts with 2 moles of hydrochloric acid, which, with 1 mole of calcium carbonate and the molar mass of, or molecular weight rather, of hydrochloric acid to produce 180 grams of hydrochloric acid. So that's the first reactant. The second reactant is hydrochloric acid, and we use 125 grams of hydrochloric acid to determine how much calcium carbonate is actually used up in the reaction. And you can see we have 86.8 grams of calcium carbonate, and we determined that calcium carbonate is our limiting reactant because it is 86.8 grams, which is less than what's actually given in the problem that actually reacts to produce carbon dioxide. So that's the first step to determine the limiting reactant. Now that we've determined which of these reactants is the limiting reactant, we can determine how much grams of carbon dioxide is produced by using what was given in the problem, 125 grams of calcium carbonate, converting it into its moles, and then you use carbon dioxide to determine how much grams is actually produced. We arrive at 55 grams of carbon dioxide produced. Okay, now the next question is how many grams of which reactant are left over? The hint was to use or to find the limiting reactant. Well, we know that a limiting reactant is calcium carbonate. So in order for us to determine how many grams of which reactant are left over, we use the excess reactant, which is hydrochloric acid. And as you can see, we calculate the amount of moles of hydrochloric acid in the reaction. In 125 grams of hydrochloric acid, you convert it into moles, you get 3.472 moles in 125 grams of hydrochloric acid. The second step is to calculate the amount of hydrochloric acid that actually reacts with calcium carbonate in the reaction, and by using the mass of calcium carbonate and its molecular weight, reacting with 2 moles of hydrochloric acid and 1 mole of calcium carbonate in the reaction, we have 2.5 moles of hydrochloric acid that is actually reacting with calcium carbonate. Now, in order for us to determine the amount of hydrochloric acid that is left over, we subtract 2.5 moles of hydrochloric acid from the actual amount of hydrochloric acid in the reaction. Remember, 2.5 moles is the amount that actually reacts with calcium carbonate. So we're subtracting that from the actual amount of hydrochloric acid in the reaction, and we arrive at 0.972 moles. To determine the amount in grams, we multiply that by its molecular weight, and we arrive at 34 grams of hydrochloric acid left over. Thank you.